All right, I'm going live a little early. Because of that, I'm going to copy. I'm going to share this really quickly into my group on Facebook. Shout out for my Facebook group. It's under Gently Led Sisters group. We have a few hundred women in there, 422 right now to be accurate. If you have not joined it, it's a public group that you can find, but once you join it, it is a private group. It's a private group that you can publicly find. There we go. So you can find that on Facebook. I also have my public page that you can follow. I don't post very often there. A lot of stuff gets posted in the Gently Led Sisters group, but it's nice because a lot of times we have questions we can throw in there. And it's a little darker today because the light right above me is not working for some reason. So we are going early today. Sorry for all the different time changes, but just know it's going to be on Monday sometime, most of the time. Last week it wasn't because of other stuff that happened, but life is busy right now. It's the holidays. And things have a way of changing, but I will always try to do a weekly live at some point. So just tap the bell if you're subscribed to me, and you'll get notified anytime that it goes live. So you can do that. But yeah, I just actually had this thought for this topic this week because our church is dealing with a really nasty cold that's going through. So, and I know a lot of young moms, hey, Sarah, a lot of young moms really struggle with knowing when should I take my child to the doctor. And I am a firm believer in taking your child to the doctor if for certain things. I am also a firm believer in not taking your kid to the doctor for every little thing. This is one of those things where, once again, you have to follow your motherly intuition, trust your gut. That will definitely help in this child rearing game. So this has definitely been a winter of sickness already. And while there are many schools of thought on this, I do believe much of it is from the fallout. Much of it is fallout from the year that we kept everyone sheltered. I've heard my own pediatrician has said it, that we are now seeing an uprise in illnesses and viruses and sickness because we sheltered 2020 babies so much that they weren't subjected to the normal viruses and colds and different things that goes around. So now they're just getting everything. Our immune systems are built in a way to fight off sicknesses and get over them, thus protecting us from that future strain of the virus. I tend to be middle of the road when it comes to illnesses. I won't go to the doctor for just anything, but I will go to the doctor. I have some steps I do before I do go, though, because most things are viruses, especially when it comes to kids. Their immune systems are not built yet. And so they're going to get more sick, and sickness is just a part of life, which you're just going to have to accept, especially when you have kids. Doesn't matter how healthy you eat. It doesn't matter how many toxins you keep out of your home. That might help you get over the sickness faster, but sickness is going to be a part of life. So I do think that there is an overuse of antibiotics, and because of this, our systems are becoming used to them. So I wrote down some common sense approaches to when it comes to illnesses and different things that we can go over. I will put the disclaimer out there. I always have to. I am not a doctor. I am not medically trained. However, I am a mom of 8 who has raised kids now for almost 21 years. And so I've seen a lot of sicknesses. I've seen a lot of illnesses. I've done a lot of research. You can still research stuff and, read studies, different things like that, look up things, even if you're not a doctor. So I have to put that disclaimer out there. I have been preached about in the past for giving medical advice, especially when it comes to this thing with using oregano oil. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later in the podcast, because I have my own pros and cons with that, and I want to just kind of throw that out there. But there are some actual studies, and I will link to them. There are actual studies that prove the effectiveness of oregano oil, especially in 21 antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So they have shown that oregano oil works better on those illnesses or viruses. Not viruses, but bacteria. Viruses, antibiotics won't cure, but they've they've done studies that it shows that 21 antibiotic resistant bacteria, oregano oil is showing effective against those. So this is not just something I made up. It has worked in my own life, but I always caution women that they need to do their own research. And if it does not work for them, because my body is different from yours and yours is different from mine, if it does not work for you, to definitely seek medical advice. And I do firmly believe that there is a time and a place for antibiotics. So I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. But the first thing with illnesses is realize that sickness will come. It doesn't matter how organic you eat. Your kids will get sick. And in fact, sickness is not a bad thing because, like I said, God designed our bodies in such a way that there are very many common childhood things that we're seeing disappear because of vaccines and different things like that. So, you've got chicken pox that's kind of becoming obsolete that we don't really see much anymore. You've got measles is kind of becoming obsolete, but those all used to be very common childhood illnesses where you would have a chicken pox party, get together with your other mom friends who has kids had chicken pox. And since I have not jabbed my kids from Lana on down, those three have actually not had chicken pox. And I'm kind of getting a little worried that they won't get it when they're kids, because it's much better to get this. Hi, Rachel. Hi, brother on. It's much easier for your body to get over it as a child rather than an adult. So I am of the school of thought that if I knew someone had chicken pox, I want my kids to be around them so that they can get it, so that they potentially don't get that when they are an adult. So that's kind of my school of thought on that. But our bodies were designed in a way to fight off illnesses and to get stronger and stronger with every illness that we fight off. Eating healthy can definitely help you fight it off better. I have noticed with the families that perhaps eat 100% organic or, don't use sugar in their day-to-day diet, that they are able to kind of fight off that illness much more effectively than those that live off of sugary cereal and soda and candy and all the sugary things. So I do think that sugar is a poison. And in America, it is very easy because they put sugar in everything. So it's actually very easy to get sugary foods. It's very hard to get off of sugary foods. And I do believe that sugary foods can decrease the amount of time it takes you to get over an illness, but that's just my school of thought on that. And obviously you can look that up and find stuff all over about it. But, use nourishing foods while they are sick, because most kids, and this is going off of experience of mine, my kids are not usually hungry when they are sick. So when they do get those calories, I want them to count. So, a lot of kids will lose some weight while they're sick, and this is totally normal. And you should notice an increase in appetite once they get better. So I would suggest for nursing moms, if you are going through a time where your child is sick, nurse him as much as they can. Now, some kids, though, their nursing decreases. So in that case, I would try to implement pumping just to keep your supply up, because a lot of moms nursing will take a hit if their kids are sick and not nursing. And then when their kid gets better and their appetite comes back, obviously they'll start nursing more and more and more, and then your supply will build back up. But to keep it from happening where you're just nursing around the clock, I would definitely implement pumping. And I've also heard that it's amazing, but when a baby is sick or a mom is sick, her breast milk will actually develop antibodies for the baby during that time of need. So it's amazing the way that God has designed our bodies. So definitely, if you have a baby, nurse. Yeah, that's a good idea, Sarah. She said cooking everything in homemade broth for the added nutrition. Bone broth is amazing. I still have yet to make it. I think we've made it one time, but I've heard it has amazing health benefits. So I would definitely do that. And then Rachel said, when we stopped vaccinating and started taking our kids to the chiropractor weekly, our kids bounce back quicker and haven't needed antibiotics in over 2 years. It's amazing. I agree with that. In fact, I'm going to mention something about antibiotics. I do not think that antibiotics are evil. I think they have their place. I think they are needed at times, but I do believe in the abuse and the over prescribing of antibiotics. But I think Kelly and Hannah have never had antibiotics. And then Lana has only needed it, I think, like one time when she almost chopped her finger off in the door. I did put her on antibiotics just because of infection. I didn't want it to get infected or anything like that. That was kind of a cautionary thing, but that happened when She's 8 now. That happened back when she was 2 or close to 2. So it's been over 6 years. And then some of my kids haven't been on them in years and years and years. Now, Allison is on them. Speaking of antibiotics, she is on them currently, but that is because her whole side of her face swelled up last week. And I think she has a tooth infection. So for things like that, you need to act speedily, because when you have an infection in this area of your face, it's very, very common that it can go quickly to the brain. So in instances like that, you need to be very careful about self-treating. And that is a time when I will go straight to medical dentist, call the dentist, a medical advice, and take the antibiotics. And it very effectively worked. I mean, within 2 days, the swelling was gone. So I think because my kids rarely take them, it does work faster on them. So, and then also I have noticed too, when I was in a time of my life when I was getting back-to-back UTIs and bladder infections, I was on an antibiotic every month, and I would literally be on the antibiotic until it cleared up. I would not start feeling better till day 8 or 9. By day 10, I was off, and then a week later I would get another one. It was an awful time of my life. I think my immune system was very low. I think the use of antibiotics just further lowered it, and it was horrible, horrible, horrible until I discovered D-mannose powder, cranberry tablets every day, and oregano oil. And the oregano oil knocks out my UTIs faster and better than antibiotics in my own case. So, and I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I was taking the antibiotics. My doctor finally got to the point where he said, I don't understand why you're getting these recurrent UTIs. And if he gave me the most powerful antibiotic there is, it was a super powerful one. I can't remember what it was called. He's like, if this does not knock it out, then we're going to have to do like a scope and see what's going on. And I really didn't want to go through that. And he didn't really want to put me through that. So thankfully, those did knock it out, which then I developed a yeast infection from that. So there's all these different side effects and things that comes that you really have to pay attention to and look to. So, but it did knock out the UTI. And then I dealt with the yeast infection. I started taking daily cranberry pills, and I didn't have another UTI until years and years and years later. I decided to try the oregano oil because I had read that it will kill bacteria. A lot of times that antibiotics won't. And I had gotten a prescription just in case from my doctor, but it had a black box warning, which really scared me. I did not like that black box warning on the prescription. So I started out, I did oregano oil, and I'm going to put the link of the oregano oil I use. And it knocked it out faster than any of the antibiotics I had ever been on. And then I did not get a reoccurring one. And it was years and years and years. I probably had 2, maybe in the last 15 years. So I think that's pretty good. But just remember, it's no one's fault that your kids got sick. It's easy to play the blame game because we go through a million kids. When you have a bunch of kids, you're like, here we go. We're going to be sick till March. It's awful. It's frustrating. And we're grouchy about it. And we want to take it out on someone, but sickness is everywhere. So, even if you have a spouse that works in the workplace, he can bring home things, you can go to Walmart and get it. You can get it on the mail, whatever. So it's everywhere. It's no one's fault. It's just, we live in a sin sick world, and, sickness is part of that. So, take it one day at a time and try not to get overwhelmed. I know anytime my kids get sick, and we're going on, I'm telling you, this last cold that they had was a doozy. And it landed some of the kids in our church. They had to have breathing treatments. They had to be on steroids. They had to get antibiotics for it. It was pretty scary what it did to some of the kids. And so we're going on 2 weeks now. But at the beginning, if I would have known that, I think I would have been very discouraged. So it's better just to take it day by day. So yeah. Ron, that's funny. I think you speak for all men. He said, I fight off sickness by pretending that I'm about to die while my wife rubs my feet and sings sweet songs to soothe my pain. Oh, isn't that so accurate of men when they have a cold? Yes. Yeah, there's some really nasty stuff going around, and it's all over the country. In fact, hospitals are becoming overrun with RSV patients, and I'm surprised that they're not screaming for us to bring the masks back. But it's just one of those things. I think we're taking a hit because our immune systems are lower than they ever have been in the last, whatever it was, from just all the sheltering in place that occurred. In fact, I just read an article. It was by a doctor, and she was saying that her child had RSV and it really scared her. And she was talking about the uprise in RSV that we're seeing right now. And she said that it's because of the whole sheltering in place, it knocked off the natural course of events that usually occurs with sickness, and it knocked it off the season too. Usually they don't see RSV till January, February, but we're seeing it earlier this year. And it's just because everything's hitting at once because of COVID. And of course, her solution was get vaccinated. That's not going to be my solution. But doctors are acknowledging that there is something going on. That's a little crazy. So, but let's go over my guidelines for church and sickness when it comes to this. I will not take my kids when they are puking, if they have puked in the last 24 hours. Puking is something I have a hard time dealing with, and I would not want to wish that on anyone. So if my kids had puked because of a sickness, you can tell. Just on Thanksgiving Day, Kelly threw up, but it was because she was coughing so hard that it caused her to throw up. That's not what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about the puking just because they overexerted themselves or they're running around too much and they have a cough. I'm talking about, they have the flu. It's puking every 20 minutes. If your kid's been doing that in the last 24 hours, I would just be aware of that for other people, keep them at home. I will not take them with a high fever. There have been times I've taken them with low grade fevers. Sometimes you take them and they develop a fever when you're there. That's no one's fault either. You don't know when your kid's going to develop fever. Sometimes they spike it real fast. But there are some instances where they can run low grade fevers, such as teething. I've heard that's a myth, but I don't believe that because my kids ran low grade fevers when they teethed, and there was nothing wrong with them other than they had teeth coming in. So some doctors will swear that that's a myth, but I'm a mom of 8 and I've seen it. So I will take my kids with colds just because colds are inevitable. Colds are something that you're not going to be able to avoid. And, it's everywhere. If they have a cold without a fever, I'm talking like the sniffles, runny nose. Oh my goodness. If I kept my kids home every time they had a runny nose, I would never go to church in winter. The whole winter they have a runny nose, and that can be from allergies. That can be from different atmosphere things going on. So runny noses, I don't mind runny noses. So yeah, the fever does sometimes come at the end of the day, and there's no telling. I mean, my kids a fever will come out of nowhere. 1 minute they're fine and the next they're running a fever. So yes, hand, foot, mouth is a nasty illness, but here's the thing about hand, foot, mouth, that can be sneaky too. You don't know they have hand, foot, mouth until they break out with the rash. And by then it's too late. And I will say, while it is a horrible, most of the time you can tell when your kid's coming down with it because they're just so fussy. They're running the fever. Nothing will calm them down. It's really a pain to deal with. But then a few days later, they break out in the rash. And that's the thing with some of these illnesses. Sometimes it's hard to pinpoint because also is it roseola? All of my kids have had. And they will run a really high fever for 5 days. And then at the end of that, once their fever breaks, they break out in the rash. And you don't know it's roseola until that happens. So you're wondering, why are they running this high fever? Is it an ear infection? There are different tools you can buy off Amazon to look into their ear. I've never done this. I haven't dealt with ear infections since I stopped jabbing my kids. So that's just with me. I haven't dealt with them. But there are scopes that you can look into their ear and see if they have an ear infection. The jury is out with antibiotics and ear infections, most of them. Some can be cured with antibiotics, but then once again, you're running into overuse of antibiotics, and there are some that need to be treated with that are just raging out of control. If you catch it early, you can self-treat with drops. I've seen great success. I have a friend whose daughter kept getting ear infections, and I left some of my garlic mullein drops there that I bought off Amazon, and she used it for a few days and the earache went away. So, I think if you can catch it early enough, but definitely if they cannot break a fever, you want to take them into the doctor, get them on something. I think it was me. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and I actually had an eardrum burst one time. I came out of my room in the morning and I was just full of pus and blood. And my hearing is I actually am a little hard of hearing in my right ear, I believe it is, because I had so many ear infections as a younger kid. That might have been the kid that might have been the eardrum that burst. I'm not sure, but I'm a little hard of hearing in my right ear because of that. So oftentimes if I can't hear something, I'll kind of go like this, because I guess instinctively I know I can hear better out of my left ear. So there are different tools that you can use before you decide if you're going to take your child into the doctor for that. It's a guessing game with a lot of illnesses, because a lot of times it's just roseola, it's hand, foot, mouth, and you don't know until they break out with that rash. Hand, foot, mouth, though, I will say you want your kids to get it when they're younger and they can't remember it. My boys had hand, foot, mouth, and I did not realize it when they were younger. And my sister was babysitting them, and she was a teenager, 15, 16, and she ended up getting it, and it was terrible. I felt so badly for her. She could not eat for a week. She had to only drink shakes, and it was a high fever for days. And she still talks about how horrendous that was and how she just wishes she would have gotten it when she was younger, because my boys don't remember having it. They don't remember having it, but that's like, it gave her PTSD because she remembers it so much. So, but yeah, I won't, with rashes, it's hard too, because I'll try to figure out the source of the rash, but some of the rashes come after they've been contagious. So if my kid has a rash, I think they might still be contagious with hand, foot, and mouth when they have it. I would keep them home until I knew for sure that was gone. And that is highly, highly contagious. Most of the time when it goes through a church, everyone's going to get it. Every kid that hasn't had it is going to get it. It's inevitable. So just give up at that point. But church is actually a really good place for kids to build immunity, and I always think of it, my husband says it this way. So what's more important, Lord Fauntleroy being in a bubble and never getting sick, or your kids hearing the word of God? Obviously, for me, the important part is that they are in church, that they get through the routine of that they're hearing the word of God. And I just look at it as church is a great way to build their immune system. They need to be around colds. They need to have colds every now and then. They need, I think COVID it made all of us paranoid and freaked out about people getting sick, but it's meant to be. People need to get sick. We need our kids to get sick. We need our kids to have a cold. We need them to have all these. I mean, I'm surprised that they don't have a jab for the common cold anymore, the way that they are about illnesses and things. So besides the fact that we as moms have to miss things sometimes, which really stinks, and I feel for you. I hate it too. I hate missing church. I hate it. But I am so thankful for live streams. When I had younger kids and I had to miss, I didn't get a live stream. I had to just sit at home with my sick child, knowing that church was going on and I was missing it. So I am very thankful for technology. I am so thankful for live streams where we can be apart, even if we have to stay home with sick kids. But I would encourage you that if you are home with sick kids during church time, make it a point to tell your kids, it's church time now. We're going to watch the service. So we're going to be quiet. We're not going to play. We're going to watch the service. We're going to lay. You can rest. Here's your puke bucket if you're puking, but we're going to sit and we're going to watch, and just let them know that church is still important, even if you're not there. So I know that sickness is a fact of life. And my kids who got sick a lot when they were younger, actually, my oldest 3, they were sick a lot when they were younger. I attribute a lot of that to the jabs. And that's why Abby had so many ear infections, I believe, was because of that. But now they rarely get sick. I mean, almost every virus that goes through our house, Abby and Chloe are like, we didn't get it. They are kind of almost flaunting it that they didn't get it. So Abby would scare me at times. When she was younger, she would spike a fever of about 104. And I have read that you don't want it to get over 104.5. And that is kind of the danger level, because it can cause brain damage and things. So watch your kids' temperature. I always encourage moms, watch your kids' temperature, take it. I know it's scary sometimes. 102 is okay. 103 is a little scary. 104 is really scary. And she would spike it sometimes to 104 in the middle of the night. So there wasn't really much I can do. And I'm going to go over ways to get that down because I learned them with her. And so she would spike it, but literally one day of that and she was over it. I think her immune system just went into overdrive and just fought it so viciously that within a day she's fine. And she very rarely gets sick. But I've had lots and lots and lots of middle of the night experiences with kids with fevers, because middle of the night is always when it spikes. 2 or 3 in the morning is always when it spikes, and their bodies would be burning up, and I knew I had to bring it down. So here are some of my common sense approaches to bringing fevers down. And I will say there's a lot of advocates out there for letting your kid run a fever as long and as much as it takes, and just don't give them anything. But how would you feel if that was you? I take stuff for my fever. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm a big wuss. No, I'm not a big wuss because I've had 8 kids pain-free. Okay. I've had no meds with any of my 8 kids, so I know I'm not a wuss, but I have to function when I've got my family. Now, kids, not as much, but I don't want them to be in agony, from this really high fever. So I do alternate Tylenol and Advil. There are different things about that. That's what I do. Some things that you can do before that, if you want to try to bring down their fever naturally, is there are tepid baths. There were many times when my husband would put on his swimming trunks and he would get into a lukewarm bath at 2 a.m. and like we would have 2 feverish kids. So I would be bringing this one's temperature down and he would be in the room temperature bath with the kid, and they hate it because they're shivering, they have a really high fever, but that will bring it down very well. We've actually taken them swimming before and they kind of have fun, even though they're miserable, but it brings their temperature down, the cooler water. So that is one thing that you can do is sometimes we'll start it out warm and we'll gradually get it colder and colder, not cold water, but it just needs to be about room temperature, tepid water. And that does work to bring down their fever quickly. Also, a wet wool sock. This is what I will do at the beginning of a night with a fever. I will get a wet wool sock, 2 of them, or really any sock that you have. Get it in cold water, wring it out, put it over their feet, and then put a dry one over their foot. That tends to draw the fever down. If you notice when kids are running a really high fever, sometimes they're really hot on top and then they're kind of get colder as they go down their extremities. So that having that cold, wet sock on their foot with a dry one over it, it somehow draws it down. And most of the time the kids' fever has broken by the morning. So, and both socks will be dry by the morning, by the time that they wake up. So I do that a lot. And then, the tepid bath, the wet wool sock with the dry one over it helps a ton. And then I do alternate Tylenol and Advil. I just use an under the arm temperature, but when you do the underarm temperature, you have to add a degree on because it's not totally accurate. So that's a way that I take their temperature. No, when my kids are running high fevers, I don't sleep pretty much the whole night, because this is one thing you have to watch out for is febrile, I think is what they're called, febrile seizures. I had a crunchy friend who was against all forms of Advil and Tylenol until the day that her child had one of those seizures. And it was terrifying. Obviously, it's terrifying when your child has a seizure. And since that day, she has used Tylenol and Advil. She said she won't let that happen again. He just spiked a fever really, really fast, and she had called the ambulance. They had to go to the hospital. She had to lay him on his side. He was like foaming. It was super scary for her. And I've never had a child that had it, but I've always had that in the back of my head. So I do watch their fever closely. So definitely watch their fever. A lot of times when they're sick, I'll bring them to bed with me and I can kind of keep an eye on it. I am perfect with all these kids. I can kiss your baby's forehead and tell you exactly what their temperature is. I know it by feeling how warm they are with my lips. It's just something I do. I can feel them with my hand, but when I kiss their forehead, I am usually within like half a degree of what their fever is. So I've kissed my kids' forehead sometimes and I'm like, oh no. And I take it, it's 103. I'm like, yep, I knew it. They're burning up. And so then that's when anything over 102, I will try to bring down very quickly. So those are just some common sense things with fevers, but definitely keep an eye on it. For some reason, alternating the Tylenol, Advil seems to work best. Advil's stronger, So you can, once you give them an Advil tablet or Advil liquid medicine, you can go a good 8 hours before they need anything else. Tylenol gets over faster. That's about 4 hours. But you do want to be careful. I try not to give this to my kids more than 2 days. Usually 2 days of a high fever is all it is. Sometimes with some illnesses, though, it is longer, like hand, foot, mouth and roseola. It's about 4 or 5 days. So I will try to stagger it out even more, and keep that fever down before it gets too high. So I know she does. Sarah's like, Sandra, can you kiss my baby? That might seem weird, but I don't know what it is. I've always been able to tell just by, it's even better than just feeling their head. I have a thermometer in my lips. I don't know. But it sounds weird, but it's very, very accurate. So during the day with sick kids with fevers, popsicles are a godsend. You want to get liquids into them, and they're not going to feel like eating. They're not going to feel like drinking. The thing that has worked best for my kids when they're sick is goldfish or any type of organic, if you're all crunchy, any type of organic cracker like goldfish. I don't know what's out there, but that's really the only thing I can get them to eat is crackers, goldfish, especially with a stomach bug. No dairy when they have a stomach bug. I have thought that my babies were over certain illnesses and I give them dairy and they puke it right back up. There's just something that's very, very, very hard on the stomach. So keep away from dairy when they have puking viruses, but goldfish, crackers, watered down juice during the day, you need to try to keep the liquids in them. They even have Pedialyte popsicles, but my kids are not huge fans of Pedialyte. I have a hard time getting them to take it, and they're even more picky when they're sick. So I have to get stuff that they like, that tastes really good. I don't run to the doctor for every fever. I have called before for fevers, and they've told me, this is crazy. One of my daughters had, I don't know if it was one of the common childhood illnesses, but there was a virus going through our house. My older kids had it. They ran a high fever. Well, I had a baby that had a well baby checkup because I do take my babies the first year for a well baby checkups to establish a relationship with my doctor. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And she was running a high fever. And so she's like, well, I want to just do a blood test. So they did a blood test. They found out that her white cell blood count was high, which of course it was. Her body was fighting off an illness. So she thought maybe possibly it could be due to a UTI. And Chloe at the time was only 9 months old. So I was like, okay, well, I don't think it's a UTI. We've had a virus going through our house. But anyways, long story short, Chloe ended up being hospitalized for about 4 or 5 days while she ran that super high fever. They wanted an IV in her because she was dehydrated. It turns into a long thing. They never did find out what was wrong with her. And to this day, I still think it was a virus. So I'm cautious because of that, because obviously kids' white cell blood count is going to be higher when they're fighting something off. And it was funny, at the end of the 4 days, her fever went away. They were like, we're baffled. We don't know what it was. And I was thinking, I do. It was the virus my other kids had. It was a crazy time, but that was a learning experience. And I learned then that not every fever, most fevers come from viruses. And the only way that you can get rid of a virus is riding it out and just waiting until it goes away. So I don't run to the doctor for every fever because of that. Most are from viruses. You can't do anything for viral infections. They have to run their course. I watch for dehydration. I have taken my Allie. I took her in. Seems like all the weird stuff happens to her. When she was 2, she had thrown up for a week. And finally, I thought we were finally turning a corner, and it was like day 6 or 7, and she started throwing up again. And she started getting very lethargic. And I was like, Allie, and she was just kind of very lethargic. So I took her to the it was a Saturday, of course, the doctor wasn't open. I took her to the ER for that one, and it was a good thing because when they tested her, she was severely dehydrated. And they told me, they're like, this can happen very quickly with kids. And she had been eating and drinking for a couple of days, but then within the space of an hour, she threw up 3 or 4 times. And they said it can happen very quickly, but you recognize the signs and you brought her in. That's great. So they gave her a liquid hydration for about 10 hours, and then we were just sent home. And they also gave me some medicine to keep her from throwing up that just dissolves on your tongue. And I did use it. at that time because I was afraid of her becoming dehydrated again, and she never threw up after that. So there have been times, and that's where following your gut comes into. You can Google it. If you're in doubt, call. Now, I will say if you call about something, they will probably tell you to go in just to cover their own backside. And, hopefully you have insurance that will cover it, but it's better to be safe than sorry when it comes to certain things. Kids can die from dehydration. Their organs can start shutting down. Different things can happen. So if they become lethargic, if they're not responding to you, if their eyes look sunk in their heads, if when they cry, there's no tears, you can also do like a pinch test on their hand. There's different things that you can do. And if there are any warning signs, take them in. It's better to just get an IV and get those fluids so that it will prevent anything from happening. So yes, the brat diet. We also did that when we were sick with the flu, bananas, rice, applesauce, toast. That tends to be easy on the stomach, and it will help just kind of, I don't know, it just helps, absorbs a lot of things. So but yeah, be aware that seizures can happen. That's why I try to keep my kids' fever below 102. So there are some things that I will take my kids to the doctor for, though, and I have. And I would caution any mom to take your kid to the doctor. And we'll go over some misconceptions about doctors in a minute, but any pain that is localized and does not go away. All right, pain, severe pain in the wrist, severe pain in an arm, severe pain in a leg. I take my kids in for. I have had a broken wrist, not me, but Jason broke his wrist once. And Kelly broke her leg once. If there's any swelling, if they injure something and it swells up really badly and the pain is localized to that area, I will take them in for an x-ray. Any swelling of an extremity. So I got very worried when last Sunday, Allie was all swollen on the side of her face. I knew that was not normal. I had actually gotten an infection in my nose, and the whole half of my face swelled up one time years and years ago, and I was put on an antibiotic for that. So I did not mess around with that. Since it was a Sunday, I started her right away on oregano oil capsules. And Monday morning, as soon as the dentist opened, I called them and they got her on an antibiotic. So it wasn't like extreme swelling, but it was enough to make me nervous. If it would have been extreme, I would have taken her to the ER for that one. Any wound that looks to have developed infection, I will not mess around with. If it's a rule of thumb is if you have a wound, draw a circle around it. And if after an hour or two, the red lines have extended the circle, then that is something that needs to be looked at. You might need to be on antibiotics for that. A nasty looking rash that looks infected. And this has happened before, once again, to Jason, and Jason got the broken wrist and Jason got the staph infection on a rash that he had both years I was at volleyball camp. So I was gone. My husband's holding down the fort, and I get these pictures from Tommy. And he's like, I think Jason is dying. And he sends me these pictures of this rash. And I'm like, that is not normal. So I called the doctor while I was at volleyball camp. I called the doctor and I set up the appointment. I told my husband, I said, you have to take him to the doctor. My husband took him. Turns out it was staph. My son was working in corn. He was working in corn. He was detasseling, and he wore this backpack that had like water and stuff in it. And it had rubbed underneath his shoulder. It had rubbed raw this spot that got infected from like the dirt and the sweat and the grime. And it was running along his bloodline all the way down his back. The rash was going. And the pediatrician told my husband, it's a good thing you brought him in, because if you let something like this go, it can get into your bloodstream and then can be fatal because it's staph. So we got him on, I can't remember if it was a cream or an antibiotic for that, but within a few days it had gone way down. I think it might have like scarred even. It was so bad, but they, went a while without telling me. And then when they did tell me, I was gone. So there's different things you can do to deal with it, even if you're gone though, away from the house. So that was a time when he had a nasty looking rash that got infected. I will take them in for a cough where they cannot breathe. Steam is not helping. It sounds like croup, or they're whooping cough, or they're whooping, or they can't catch their breath between coughs. Or they suddenly develop a fever after not having one for several days. That's something to watch for too. Usually your kids' bodies will react, fever, gone, they're over it. But sometimes with a cough, it can develop pneumonia, and that's what you look for. Fever, 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 gone, perfectly fine. A few days later, back to fever, fever, fever. That can be a little scary. I would take them in to get checked for that, just so the doctor can listen and see what's going on with that. So, I will do antibiotics for most of the above. So infected rashes, deep cut wounds that get infected, swelling, which would be like a tooth infection. I would not mess around with that because of the close proximity to the brain. Those are things that you don't mess around with. So yes, and that's another thing. You look for the appendix, you look for localized pain as well, but then sometimes their whole stomach just hurts. My husband had appendix and he had to get it taken out, and it had started out like on the one of his lower sides, but then it gradually, his whole stomach area just hurt. And sometimes with little kids, that can be hard. So I watch for that too. She said she thought that her daughter had the same flu that her older son had, but it turned out to be an appendix and it ruptured. And that can be really scary because by the time it gets to where it ruptures, it's going through your whole system. And appendix is tricky sometimes. Sometimes doctors will tell you, you will take them in. Nope, fine. They just have the flu, whatever, because it mimics the flu so much, but then it does turn out to be an appendix. So that can be tricky for sure. My aunt, I had her on the show, Mrs. Pam Graham, if you want to look up that story. Her son almost died from that, and she had taken him to the doctor 2 or 3 times saying something is not right, and he just kept saying no, it's the flu. And then it turned out it was his appendix. It ruptured. He almost died from it. His body went into sepsis shock. It's crazy. So that is something you definitely need to be aware of. So quickly, let's talk about oregano oil and why I think it's just amazing, amazing stuff. And you can be a hater and whatever. I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just telling you what has worked for me. So let me copy this. I'm going to copy this and paste it. If you're looking for something that can maybe help, hopefully the whole thing will paste. No, it does not. Oh, let me look up the whole comment. I might just have to paste it into, let me see if there's a share button. It has to be a certain kind of oregano oil. I'm not talking like this is just some little, like essential oil thing. This is an actual, brand that I use. It's very powerful. There we go. Okay. So there's the link for what I use. It's North American Herb and Spice. It's super strength oregano P73. So it's Mediterranean source P73. And it's good stuff. I mean, it's expensive, but a bottle of it, it's nature's antibiotic, basically. God gave us nature's antibiotic. And the nice thing is that there are, I will also post the link to a study, but just let me look it up really quickly. I sent it to Abby. So there is a, it's from an actual, let's see, Frontiers in Microbiology, from some weird doctor's names, bactericidal property of oregano oil against multi-drug resistant clinical isolates. So it's basically a study about oregano oil showed significant antibacterial activity against 11 MDR clinical isolates, including 4 big long words, 4 staph infection type things obtained from combat casualties and 2 strains of something. So this is, it said oregano oil also effectively eradicated biofilms formed by each of the 13 pathogens above at similar MICs. So it's just a big study about it, showing how with skin wound infection even, but I have personally taken it for the things that I mentioned, strep throat. It was the same thing. The antibiotic had a black box warning. I was not comfortable with that. So I went ahead and did that. And you could find articles that will tell you how dangerous strep throat is and how you don't want to mess around with it. And I agree. And that's why I would encourage anyone to do their own research and also to go to the doctor, please. In fact, on the video that I did about it, someone left a comment and said, it hasn't worked. I've been doing it for 2 days. And I said, please go to the doctor. You need to get an antibiotic. So I definitely encourage people to get it. If it does not work after, let's say you go a day, you go 2 days, it doesn't work. You need to get on top of it and get something. Even if it's taking it along with, an antibiotic too. This is just something, I tend to take my own health into my own hands. And if I'm not comfortable taking an antibiotic that says that it can cause your muscles to tear and rip, then I am going to try an alternative, which is oregano oil. So oregano oil has no side effects. You do not want to take it when breastfeeding or pregnant though, because if you're breastfeeding, it can reduce your milk supply. And if you are pregnant, it can cause, especially in the early stages, it is something that encourages menstruation. So it can bring on your cycle too. So I can't remember what that word is, but it can bring that on. So you want to be careful taking that if you are pregnant. So if I ever take it, I only take it when I'm not pregnant or not nursing. That is one thing that I do. So here's an article, I can link to it. There's also an article about oregano oil for use in UTI treatment. Obviously, oil oregano is not approved by the FDA. And I believe that's by design. They want you relying on antibiotics and things like that. So, but there are multiple lab and some clinical studies that demonstrated strong antibacterial properties of oil of oregano. Herbalists recommend oil of oregano to treat rather than prevent urine infections. The recommended dose is about 500 milligrams of oregano oil 4 times a day. There are important precautions and side effects that need to be considered when taking oregano oil for UTI. And when choosing oregano oil, go for the oil produced in Greece, which is what I linked to. And with at least 60% of carvacrol, scroll for review of popular brands. And the one that I linked, I believe, has 70% of carvacrol, 73%. Yep. Natural carvacrol levels. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't even know what that is, but it's 73% is the one that I linked to. This one is the one I've often said, if we ever have the apocalypse and we can't get our hands on antibiotics, I am going to have a stash of this because it can pretty much cure everything. So, so yes, this is another article that I can link to when I am done. For vitamins. Now, vitamins, I've actually been encouraged to take vitamins for my thyroid nodules because a lot of times you will develop nodules, well, most often because of hormonal things, but maybe you are deficient in some. So honestly, anytime that I've had my pregnancies, I've just taken a chewable vitamin, and I don't know, I feel like it did pretty good. So there are organic chewable vitamins that you can get that I would encourage you to look into if you want to go that route. There's different schools of thoughts when it comes to that too. So my disclaimer on oregano oil is just, do your own research. And, but like I said, if you're not comfortable with taking an antibiotic with a black box warning, and always research your antibiotics too. And I looked up the antibiotic before I took it, and it had a black box warning right on it. And I looked it up, and there were cases of just very healthy, successful people that had taken this antibiotic, and their muscles literally disintegrated from taking certain antibiotics. So it's rare, but it can happen. So you need to know your risks when it comes to taking any type of medicine. It doesn't matter who gives it to you, but there are some. Bye, brother. On nice talking to you. Gently led brothers. No, it couldn't be gently led brothers. You would have to be like roughly led brothers, right? Because there's nothing gentle about men, right? So but there are some weird beliefs when it comes to doctors, and I want to touch on those. There's this belief out there that all doctors are evil and all doctors are out to get you, and if you bring your child in for a well baby check, then you're going to get DCFS called on you. That is not true. There's a balance to everything, and I think there can be a balance to this too. Find someone you like and use them for emergencies. I have a steady pediatrician I've had Actually, our chiropractor here in church told us about him. They've never given them a problem for not jabbing their kids. And actually, I think pretty much everyone in the church uses him now, but he's very down to earth. He's very no nonsense approach. He doesn't try to go in for the big tests and doing things overboard. He goes for the smallest, most common sense thing to start out with. And he does not give us a problem. He does not give us any heat for not jabbing our kids. So, and I've always done the first year of well baby checks just because I want him to know my child a little bit. I want him to be on base with me when it comes to stuff. I want him to see that they're taken care of and that they're growing, that there's no abuse. I want him to be on record to be able to say that. So that is why I do it with our pediatrician. That's the way I've always done it. We have a lot of haters out there. We have a lot of people that don't believe in the way that we are raising our kids, and they don't, in their mind, they just can't grasp the concept that you can discipline your kids without abusing your kids. And so I take my kids for the first year, sometimes the first 2 years, to regular well baby checks so I can track their growth and my doctor can see that they are well taken care of. That's my belief on that. I will take them, for emergency situations such as a broken leg, a wrist, if they've been throwing up for a week, if they're dehydrated. You need to realize that life is about balance. Realize that sometimes big families are under scrutiny, and there have been big families in the past that have caused this to happen. They've been a bad example of how you take care of your kids, of thinking all doctors are evil and never getting them prompt medical care when they had something like a broken foot or a broken ankle or a broken arm. That is not right to do to your children. Doctors are there for times of need like that. So realize that sometimes big families and sometimes Christian families are going to be under scrutiny, and act wisely. So there have been some horrible stories that have happened to families that have taken their kids into the doctor, and maybe it was a bad doctor and they got DCF called on them and had their kids taken away. And that is awful. And it does happen. I will put that out there. It's very rare. It does, but I've also seen it too, where the parents should have taken them in for medical help and they did not. And that's not right either. So it's all about a balance. That's why I have found a doctor that I trust and that I like and that I have a relationship with, and it works for us. So that's what we've done. Hi, Jenny. There are weird beliefs that doctors don't ever, or no, that's for natural things. So yeah, just realize that big families are sometimes under scrutiny. And then there are some weird beliefs when it comes to natural things too. So once again, on the flip side, they never work, they're all placebos. The people who are into natural stuff are into witchcraft. You should never use natural. You should always go the medical route. And then if you aren't a doctor, you aren't supposed to give advice ever. Now, I definitely don't believe on pastors giving like cancer advice or medical, they're not doctors in that sense. But as a mom of 8 who's used a lot of these different things, this is just advice that I've learned, advice that I've given, things that I've seen, growing up. So just remember that it's all about balance, balance, balance. Okay. Balance, balance, balance. You're going to learn so much just by living life and going through different situations in your life, which is a lot of what I've learned. Don't allow a doctor to bully you, but be respectful in your dialogue with them. So when I went in for my thyroid nodules, my thyroid doctor was actually very surprised when I was just spitting out facts about what was going on, what I had researched. And she was like, actually, yeah, like, everything I'm telling you. She was like, you've been down this road, what's going on. And she was surprised that I knew some of the things I did about different supplements that might help, different foods that might cause the nodules to grow. She was kind of surprised that I knew all that, but I told her, I said, I research everything and I've been dealing with this since I was 16. So I kind of know what's going on. But one thing that I've always done in my own life is I'm informed, and I try to be informed about what illnesses are out there, what my children has, be informed about antibiotics, be informed about side effects, be informed about natural remedies, be informed about the side effects of natural remedies. But I'm also ready to change my game plan if necessary. if I have something that just a natural remedy isn't taken care of, I will go to the doctor and I will go the medicinal route. So you always, just don't get stuck in this, oh, I'm never going to do it this way and I'm never going to do it that way. And medicine never helps and natural remedies never help. You can have the best of both worlds. So it's all about balance and trusting your gut and following your instinct in a lot of different situations, and not letting someone bully you, whether that's someone bullying you for going to the doctor or someone bullying you for, not going to the doctor in this situation. So you're the parent, you know what's best for your child. But yeah, definitely listen to your gut and listen to your instinct when it comes to things. And you're right, Sarah. She said, my midwife and I talked about how people now don't look into anything for themselves. They expect a doctor to know their body better than they do. They do. And they'll just blindly take anything that the doctor gives them, even if there's a black box warning. And then when something happens as a result of it, they're a victim. Well, yeah, it's horrible that happened, but you have to research things. You have to look into things for yourself. Don't just blindly trust me because I'm throwing out this advice. You might have something that interacts. You might have an allergy to the plant oregano. You might have I have an allergy to some antibiotics. I'm allergic to erythromycin. So I have to be very careful in any situation where I'm being given antibiotics that I tell them that, I'm allergic to this. And so my body is different and reacts differently to medications than yours. Anything with the isin in the end of it, erythromycin, anything that has the isin in the end, I am probably allergic to. So I stay away from. I don't even take anything in that category of drugs. So a lot of the amoxicillin, that stuff's okay for me. Penicillin, that's like as old as the hills, but that anything, and you have to look at that too. So if I'm allergic to this, if I'm allergic to basil, I might be allergic to oregano or whatever. So, just use your brain, use the brain that God's given you, look it up. Don't be lazy, research, call moms of many. It's so funny. I have a couple family members that are like registered nurses and have been nursing school, and they will still call me for pregnancy related advice. And they will still call me, even though they know what the textbooks say, they'll still call me for when their kids are sick or something's going on. So it's pretty funny, but they just know I've had a lot of kids and I've been through a lot of different situations with my kids. So just use the brain God has given you, and just take a common sense approach to these things. So but I am, go back and look what I was saying about febrile seizures. I would just definitely keep your fever low, try to keep their fever lower, watch for it. If they do have one, you're going to have to call the emergency. And, I think when my friend had her child, she had to lay him on his side and, make sure they're not going to fall and hit themselves on anything. But I just try to have the mindset of, I don't want them to get to that point of the seizure. So I keep their fever below a certain point yeah. Febrile seizures are scary. Definitely put it down below what you did. Put it in the comments, exactly what you did for that. That would be helpful. But I need to get going because I am taking my husband to the airport. He will be gone in Israel for the next almost 2 weeks, and it's going to be interesting holding on the fort. We'll see how it goes. So pray for me over the next 2 weeks. I'll let you know next Monday how it's going. And pray for him when he's in Israel that everything will go great. He is working on a documentary with Brother Paul Wittenberger, so they will both be over there for a while. Brother Paul will be there for longer than him. But pray that they get into the right places and talk to the right people, and God keeps them safe when they are over there. So that is why we had the earlier time today. So I will see you next Monday. Who knows what time? Probably regular time. We'll see what happens. So I am going to be doing a Christmas giveaway of some gift cards here in the next couple of weeks. I had a listener that wants to donate some again. So we will be doing that in the next couple of weeks. So I hope you all have a great week, and we will see you guys later.